Hello and welcome back for Project HorrorTown DevLog number 3. I'm Layla, and together with my husband Jim, we're embracing the path of indie game developers. We're currently in the early days of developing an ambitiously substantial first-person video game set in a small open world. In this episode, I want to talk to you a little bit about the map, inspiration for buildings, and level layout in general. Last time I showed you how we build our houses in levels from shells to fully furnished houses. We don't only have houses though, we have apartments and shops, and now we have Bryce's house. Bryce inherits a big Victorian Gothic mansion from her aunt Iris. In gameplay terms, this is the player's home base where crafting and other gameplay activities will occur. We are somewhat limited on what we can create by our assets. As I've mentioned, Jim and I have primitive 3D skills, and we made the decision early on to purchase the vast majority of the assets we are going to need and then tweak them to suit. So our assets are based on stylized North American houses and buildings. This led us to research reference materials for towns and house designs from North America. We found various Victorian Gothic mansions, and Jim built this epic 3-story house for Bryce and her companions to rattle around in. It's currently a bare-bones shell, so we'll need filling with props like furniture, plants, and knickknacks. I particularly love the conservatory and cannot wait to flesh it out with more content. This, just like the other buildings, is built in layers. This serves several purposes, both from the convenience of being able to hide upper floors, but also how a building can be set up for LOD or level of detail purposes. Previously, I mentioned that I came up with the rough layout of the level whilst traveling. This wasn't without a lot of conversations about our level requirements beforehand. I just need to ruminate for a while on stuff before it coalesces into something. So what were those requirements? Firstly, we only want a smallish settlement. We don't want to build a vast city like Cyberpunk or GTA. There's only the two of us. So we needed something that was a manageable size for us to create and populate. There are also some technical limitations. Our chosen global illumination system, this is the APV stuff I talked about in the last video, requires the whole world to be present in order to bake the lighting. This is a development time problem, but we're learning that it takes a ton of computing resources to bake it. We also don't have the tech in place for world streaming. This means fitting the entire world into memory. This will probably work for our target platform of gaming PCs, but we have the feeling we're probably going to need to sort it out in the future. Going back to level requirements, the second one was that we wanted a way to restrict the player. What I mean by this is a way to box in the playable area. In Cyberpunk, the player is told that there's nothing out there for you yet when they try to leave the playable area. We decided to use the geography itself to mostly restrict the player. This meant we needed a peninsula or an island. We thought long and hard about the island, but in the end we went with a coastal peninsula blocked in by mountains. The only road out will not be an option due to reasons, which will become apparent as the game unfolds. The third requirement concerned story-related areas. Now, this is a bit of a chicken and egg issue, and it's a bit like knowing what colour paints you have before knowing what picture you can paint. For us, this meant that we needed to know what environmental assets were available to purchase, and then how they would feed into the story and make for an interesting environment for the player. This led to details of the game story being inspired by the assets we had available. This limitation was actually really beneficial in helping to sculpt what we feel will be a rich and detailed game world. We decided to purchase the majority of our asset packs from a company called Cinti. They make a popular series called Polygon. If you are in the game dev world, you've probably heard of Cinti. If you haven't, they are basically the Lego equivalent for game assets. The sheer volume of different packs they have is amazing, and they are all in a uniform style, which is essential for a cohesive game world. Now, I know this might make it sound like we're limiting ourselves to the creativity of the asset providers, but I think we're taking what we have and combining and modifying them in ways which have far surpassed what we originally thought could be possible. And finally, we really wanted the levels to be somewhere a player could relate to, with characters that a player may have met. This feeds into the overall feel we want the player to have whilst playing. If you've never heard the phrase "call of the void," then I can assure you, you've experienced it at some point in your life. It's that voice you hear that says, "What if you just smashed all the plates on the ground?" But then your common sense kicks in and stops you. We originally wanted to capture this feeling and see if we could portray the protagonist's resistance to the feeling, her actions becoming more reckless, and the risks growing. We still have aspects of this, however, we've moved more towards a general moral descent for Bryce. Bryce is just an ordinary woman, forced to cross ethical boundaries to survive. And she's pushed to break free from societal norms, and the player with her. And we see a gradual corruption of her values and ideals. This feeds back directly into point 4 of our level design requirements. We needed the player to relate to Bryce and the game world. Therefore, we need familiar and mundane environments such as a cafe, sleepy suburban streets of generic houses, and a host of NPCs going about their daily lives. So how do we get our NPCs going about their daily lives? Well, that's a topic for another video. So subscribe to the YouTube channel or become a free Patreon member and get regular updates on the game's development. Thanks for watching and see you next time.